is religious orientation and involvement. It includes experiential, ritualistic, ideological, intellectual, creedal, and moral cultural dimensions to the practice of religiosity. So orientation, religious orientation and involvement. In Portuguese, it simply means the human tendency towards the sacred. So we can combine these two definitions to say that religiosity is this movement of the soul seeking the sacred, seeking the divine, and includes rites, practices, ideology, beliefs, and some cultural background as well. Okay? So this sentiment, this experience of religiosity is an experience that is innate to human beings. So since we were in the caves, right, as primitive species, we already try and seek to understand the divine and seek to connect to the divine in some way, shape, or form. And today, and throughout history, this search for the divine, to connect with the divine, has been very much an outwards movement of the soul, and a movement that has been very limited and restricted to some circumstances, as we will see. So, for instance, where is the best place for us to connect with the divine? And for many of us, it has been historically our temples, our churches, and nowadays the spiritual center. So we might say, oh my God, I am feeling very bad today. I need to go to the center so I can reconnect with God. So although that has been historically our movement, right? It's not so much in the past. It remains in the present moment. So we have also established culturally not only places, but we have in our tradition dates where we spare to connect more deeply with the divine. So we have in our culture, for example, days for forgiveness in the Jewish culture, right? So there's a day specific where you spend the entire day in seeking to forgive. There is a day to be thankful. We have Thanksgiving, right? And so in that day is a day that we focus, we even get together in family to be thankful. And so in those days, we are fully aware of this need to be thankful or to be forgiven. So we have places to connect with the divine. We have dates that we spare in our lives where it helps us to remember the important things that we should be doing pretty much every day. We also have established sacred objects. In Spiritism, we don't have that so much, but many religions will use images and special objects that they consider to be sacred. Although we have been in these religions and we bring to Spiritism our history, and so we sometimes make things sacred. Although we understand differently, we still bring these tendencies with us because we have related to the divine and to the sacred in these ways. We also have the sacred people. So in the churches and temples, you have the ministers, you have the priests, and in the Spiritist movement, you also have the sacred people. So a lot of times, not to say that I'm more sacred than anyone, but because the position that we take, people come to us and say to us, can you please pray to God for me? As if, in order to communicate to God, we need an intermediary. But we believe that some people have more power to communicate with God, which is still our previous experiences being transferred to the Spiritist movement. And so, although we don't say that so formally, we still play that way in the Spiritist Center. So, the Apostle, Paul of Tarsus, he, in his letter to Corinthians, he will say the following: we commend ourselves in all things, in much patience, in afflictions, in hardships, in distress. And the Spirit Emmanuel is going to comment this passage of Paul. And the title of the chapter is In All Things. In All Things. So I'm going to read just a couple paragraphs because it goes in line with what we are talking about. So Emmanuel will say, most adherents of the gospel do not seriously consider the religious aspect of life except in outward worship activities. Many believe that it is enough for them to assiduously attend gatherings of the faithful, so come to the center every Sunday, that should be enough. And with that, all the enigmas of the soul, as far as our relationships with God is concerned, will be deciphered. So if I go to the center, everything will be revealed to me and everything will be taken care of. However, the teachings of Christ call for individual renewal and growth in all circumstances. And a little ahead, he's going to say, it is crucial that disciples make themselves commendable in all things, demonstrating the excellence of the ideas that nourish them both at home and at church, in their daily activities and in the public streets. So he is inviting us, he is telling us that we need to make ourselves commendable. We need to demonstrate the excellence of the ideas, of the concepts that we embrace, and that is also of our search and desire for connection with the divine, not only in the church, but at home, in the streets, and everywhere else. So under the paradigm that Emmanuel is introducing to us, then things start to look a little different, to shift a little bit. Because under this paradigm, our workplace can be a sacred place, can't it? Right? If you are present in your workplace, in your work environment, and you are connected with what is essential in life, and you see in every co-worker, right, a brother or sister in God, and you bring love and you bring awareness to that space, that becomes a space of work, a space of growth, a space of service. Not only the service that you're being paid for, but the service that you are doing in the name of God. And that is a true sacred place because we connect to God towards each other, through each other. Under this paradigm, then the sacred objects can be the broom that sweeps the floor of the center, can't it? Can be the scalpel that is performing a surgery in the hands of a doctor. Can be the hoe in the hands of the farmer who is working the land. So there is an incredible shift in paradigm because every single tool, when used by love, can become a sacred tool. And if we follow this idea and this paradigm, then all days are sacred days because all days are new days for renewal, for growth, for enlightenment, and for the practice and manifestation of love in our lives. So all days are days for forgiveness, are days for being thankful, are days for devotion, are days for brotherhood. And we no longer need to see anyone as divine, and we come to the conclusion that we don't need intermediaries in our relationship with God, because no matter who you are and no matter where you are in our evolution, we are divine beings. We are children of the Creator, and our connection with the Creator is straight. It don't call for intermediaries. We can talk to God directly, that God will listen to us and will respond to us in the same way that it will with anyone else. What varies is the response. The response comes to us in accordance to our needs, not to our wishes. And that's a very different idea. And going back then to Emmanuel, he is going to end this page by saying, of course, no one has to live solely with their hands folded or gazing into the heavens. However, let us not forget that gentleness, goodwill, cooperation, and politeness are divine aspects of the living prayer of a disciple of Christ. So a lot of times we talk about the importance of prayer, because prayer is a channel for connection. The idea, though, that Spiritism introduced to us is that we invited to make our daily lives a constant prayer. A constant prayer. We are constantly praying, we're constantly connecting as we bring, as Emmanuel says, gentleness, goodwill, cooperation, politeness. And he says, these are divine aspects of the living prayer. So the idea of not stopping to pray, but making your lifestyle a living prayer. So that's a much broader sense of religiosity, let's put it this way, that Spiritism proposed to us. And it's interesting because under the old paradigm that we have a place, we have a date, we have a time, right, in order to connect with the divine, it frees us from certain responsibilities. So let me explain what I mean, right? So if you believe that there is a day for forgiveness, it's okay not to forgive on the other days. Now, this is present in the Spiritist movement, and I will give you an example because we are far from this idea that Emmanuel presents to us. I'm going to give you a very classic example in Spiritism for the ones who participate in the mediums group, in the mediumship group. This is a day that we are instructed to eat better, to take better care of ourselves, because we are going to be talking to the spirits, connecting with the spirits, doing a work that's highly specialized and that requires from us the donation of our best vibrations. That's the core of the work. We are there and we need to, because it's a work where a lot of energy is given, then it requires that we are a little bit more balanced than usual. So that day, we try not to reach so heavy, we try to be more patient, we try to avoid conflicts that day. Right? So that's exactly what we have been doing. What Spiritism is proposing is that we do that every day. That every day we wake up and say, today I'm going to meet with the spirits, because we do. Right? And I am going to put out there my best at all times, at all days. So we are right now facing this time that we call the planetary transition. And so it's really not enough anymore that our religiosity, this search for God, continues to be so, let's put it this way, immature, infantile, right? It's important in what Spiritism does and invite us to do is to expand our awareness and to make each day and each moment of our lives this constant search and desire to connect and to express, to manifest the best of us, so that we can, not in the temples, but everywhere, be a positive influencing force in the lives of the ones who are next to us, but also in our own lives for our own benefit. Because the first person who benefits from this mindset, it is ourselves. So Spiritism brings to us three important references that help us with this awareness and that have provided us with this new paradigm of living. So the first one is Jesus, in the sense that he is the path, he is the way, his message, right? His message is the path. So Kardec asked the spirits who was the highest soul reference that had been in this planet, and the spirits will say it is Jesus. So he is our goal, our aim. We aim to be like him, because different than other religions, in Spiritism we understand that Jesus is a brother who was created by God just like us, because we understand in Spiritism that there are no privileges. God would not be fair if certain spirits were privileged over others. And so we all have the capability of being Christ ourselves. That's the goal. The goal is that the Christ in us becomes alive and manifests. And that's what we're working towards. So he is the reference. But after him comes Allan Kardec. And what Allan Kardec is going to provide us primarily is with education. Allan Kardec is an educator. He is going to shed light in many of the things, and when I say Allan Kardec, I'm talking about Spiritism, but I am emphasizing his role in the organization of the material, in the compilation, in the codification. He did in such a way, asking questions, going back to the questions, asking the same questions in different ways, so that we could really understand what is the essence of life. So with Kardec, what Jesus does is, okay, I am the way, now I'm giving you a GPS. He is going to guide you, because he brings light, he shows the path, he brings understanding. And with Kardec and Jesus, we start to understand that all the connection and this search for God is essentially an inner movement of the soul. And it comes through not rituals necessarily, not sacred places that we visit, not sacred objects, right? But it comes through our relationships. I was coming over here, and this morning I kind of was actually posting the lecture online, and saw that a friend posted that it's something like this, that the more I know dogs, the less I want to be with humans. You get the idea, right? I have seen this before, posted by other people. This person is someone who I care about, I consider to be a friend. So I went outside of Facebook and sent her a personal message and said, this really saddens me. because it shows a lack of hope in humanity. Because, it was funny because I read that while I was walking my dog. If you know anything about me, you know that I'm not a dog person. But 3 years ago, this dog came into my life through my kids. And now the dog follows me everywhere in the house. I can no longer go to the bathroom by myself. He's always there staring at me. And I used to joke and I used to say that having a dog would be like the last thing that I needed to become a pure spirit. So I'm very close now because I have developed a very close relationship with this dog. And so it's not that I don't understand what she's talking about, right? So the dog, whether you mistreat him, whether you forget about him, whether you leave him at home, he will greet you exactly the same way. But the difference is that dog doesn't have, like we have, the continuous thinking process, right? To judge me, to look at my shortcomings, right? And to relate with me in a different level. So I told her, she said, I wrote to her, she wrote back, and she said, I'm frustrated with humans. And I said, well, your frustration with humans is speak about your frustration with yourself. Because we become frustrated with others not because of others, because we put on others expectations that they cannot meet. And we do the same thing to ourselves. We expect at times more than what we are really ready to give. And that's where compassion and love comes into place. But if you cannot experience that towards yourself, yes, you will be very frustrated with humanity and perhaps lose hope. So my message for her was like, don't lose hope in humanity. And most importantly, don't lose hope in yourself. Because human beings are worth it. They are divine. We are all divine, you included. Anyways, end of the conversation. She actually replied, I haven't looked at the reply yet, but it kind of, that came to mind. So Kardec is the GPS, he's the educator. And one of the things that he's going to do is to remove from our faith some of the mysticism, right? Some of these exterior practices and really help us to focus on the inwards movement. The connection is from within. So in that perspective, again, anytime you want to connect with the divine, wherever you are, you should be able to do that. It's not what you do outwards, it's what happens inwards that manifests outwards, that establishes the connection. And so, then comes, I want to bring a third person that's a strong reference in spiritism for us. Because if Jesus is the reference, if Kardec is the GPS, when we talk about the concept of religiosity and the concept of bringing religiosity to every encounter, to every day, and to every place of our lives, the figure of Chico Xavier, who I mentioned in the beginning, he is the personification of the Spiritist philosophy, as well as a living synthesis of the gospel in every single act of his life. So we have, because when we read The Moral Person, and we're going to get to a few passages right now, we think, this is impossible. But it's not impossible. We will get there. And I think that Chico Xavier, one of the many missions that he had was to exemplify to each one of us how true religiosity expresses in life and what it means from the spiritist perspective. So, it is a passage that has many items, 19 to be more precise, in the description of the moral person. So obviously, I have 10 minutes. I'm not going to have time to go over all of them. I'll try to read some of them and bring some little stories about Chico that I think exemplify how these ideas can be seen and experienced in our daily lives. So it starts by saying, truly moral persons are those who practice the law of justice, love and charity in its greatest purity. If they question their conscience about their actions, they ask themselves if they have violated this law, if they have done any harm, if they have done all the good that they could, if they have willingly disregarded any opportunity to be useful, if anyone might have a complaint about them, and finally, if they have done unto others everything they would like to have done unto themselves. So I want to highlight here, if they have done all the good they could, if they have willingly disregarded any opportunity to be useful. So, in this little book, Beautiful Cases of Chico Xavier, there is a little story that it's called Go With God. And it was, if you know a little bit about Chico Xavier, and many of you may not know, he barely slept. He started his work at the center around 8 o'clock at night, and he would finish normally around 2, 3, sometimes 4 o'clock in the morning. And after that, he still would have a little piece of cake and coffee with the people who would accompany him to his house. He would sleep more or less 2 hours a day. And his whole day was a day of service. So one of these days, he had worked very, very, very late with Emmanuel in psychographing. So he was a little late for the work in the next day. He was in a hurry. And he is rushing to get to the bus or the train, and a woman named Alice, she says, I've been waiting for you since very early this morning because I need an explanation for a message that you gave me yesterday. It was a medical recommendation that she needed clarification. And he says to her, I'm so late, I will try to catch up with you at lunchtime. And he continues to walk, and Emmanuel appears to him and said to him, go back and attend the woman. And so he said to him, you're going to spend 5 minutes with her, and that's not going to hurt your time and your day. So he returns, and the woman says to him, I knew you would come back because I know your heart. And he gives her the clarification that she needs, and she says to him, God bless you. Go with God. So he was walking back to try to pick up the bus, and then Emmanuel says to him, stop a little bit and look behind you and see what's coming out of her lips and chest. And Chico turns around and look, and he sees a flow of luminous energy coming out from that woman in his direction. And so he says to Chico, can't you see how many results we can gather when we bring happiness to the life of our brothers and sisters? So this is one little case that talks about him, but also, when we talk about doing all the good that you could, there is another story about him where it was about 2 o'clock in the morning, and the president of the center, who probably was tired, told some of the workers to go and to close the gates so that no more people would be attended. And the worker said to the president, shouldn't we tell Chico? He says, no, 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 don't tell him, because it's better not to bother him and all that. So a few minutes go by, and Chico called the president and say, my dear brother, please reopen the gates of the center, because as long as there is one person here, I cannot go home. So, are we doing all the good that we can, right? And this is not, I mean, for us to beat ourselves up. I think he is a missionary, and I think he's a reference. But I think sometimes when we think about Jesus or you know, spirits who we have heard but have not lived with us so closely, it feels so impossible. And it's not really impossible. It starts with awareness and daily practice. I confess that after reading all this, I told myself, I need to do a better job. I need to do a better job at the center. I need to do a better job in my daily life, in making myself available to others. Sometimes it's just the patience of listening to someone, hugging someone, giving someone 1 minute of our attention when we are so like in a hurry and so concerned with our own belly button, as we say in Portuguese, né? Well, umbigo. So it continues here, and given the time, let me try to. So there is a sentence that says, they have faith in the future. Thus, the moral person, right, has faith in the future. Thus, they place spiritual possessions above temporal ones. And so, faith in the future. Faith in the future in the face of financial adversities, for example. So Chico Xavier was part of a huge family, many brothers and sisters. His second mother passed away. He's still very young. And so it was up for him and for his dad to provide for the entire family. And and at some point, and his dad had a very difficult time holding jobs. He didn't have much instruction. And at some point, he gets very sick with a type of, I want to say rheumatoid arthritis that paralyzes him. He can't work. So Chico needs to provide a loan for the entire family. And they start to falling behind on the payments because the treatment for the father required 2 injections a month that cost the amount of the injections was all the money that he made. So all the money went for the injections and treatment of his father. So they started to owe money in many different places. And so at the same time, Chico launches one of his books called Brazil, Heart of the World, Country of the Gospel. And this book is very well accepted. And some friends come to tell Chico about the success of the book. And his father, listening to this, will tell him, Chico, why can't we use some of another book of yours to gather some money for ourselves? I hear that you gave the money of this book in its entirety to all the souls. They are in need, but we are souls in need. And you gave all the money to the poor. But I cannot think of anyone that's poorer than us at this point in time. So he questions the spirits, and he doesn't really understand the spirits. And Chico will tell him that, you know, with tears in his eyes, because it's his father who is in need, that they have a lot of friends that God would provide, and that he couldn't take money for something that was not his work. It didn't belong to him. So even in times of hardship, he maintains his integrity. He shows his faith in the future. He knows that God will provide, and he talks kindly with his father. The story is actually quite funny because the father says that the spirits don't understand anything of hardship because they have lived in other times and they don't know the price of the beans and the rice at that time that they were living, and that when he discarnates himself, that tells Chico, continue to play in the lottery in the months of June and December, because I'm going to come and I'm going to stop the what is that called, the roulette at the number that you chose. So he tells that there's this very cool story. All right. So to finalize, let me give you like one more little story. So it says the moral persons are kind, humane, and benevolent towards all, regardless of race or creed, because they regard all people as their brothers and sisters. So again, regard all as brothers and sisters. So Chico is walking towards a very popular place in the city of São Paulo, in Brazil, and with a friend, and some prisoners of very, what's the word in English? They were very dangerous. They had escaped. And as they were walking, they see these men in these orange suits with numbers on the back. And the friend says to him, I think those guys are the very dangerous people who escaped the prison. Maybe we should turn around. And Chico said, no. They are our brothers, and we are going to walk towards them. And the guy says, but Chico, they kill people. And they are, maybe we should just turn around and walk in another direction and say, no. Nothing's going to happen to us. They are our brothers. And so the person goes shaking, right? And as they are getting close, one of the robbers says, let's kill them. And the guy says, Chico, let's run. Then he says, no, Emmanuel is telling me that we should keep going. So imagine that. So they go, they pass by the robbers, and as they get closer, Chico says, good morning, how are you? Are you guys good? And they all respond that they are good, and one of them recognizes that he's Chico Xavier and says, it's Chico Xavier. This guy doesn't have anything. He is not good for us. Let him go. And they go forward. But he feared no one, and he treated absolutely every single person with the same love, with the same compassion. He saw no difference between human beings. I will close, and I really recommend go back to this chapter in the moral persons. Is so incredibly beautiful. But I would like to finish with one more, let me see, one more idea, and I know it's in page 100. Let me see if it's this book, because I memorized the page, but I didn't write the book. Yes, it is here. Chico Xavier, he was very aware of his own limitations. I think this is very important to say. He was human. He had his moments of anguish. He had his moments of affliction. When he's asked about his mediumship, he says that the contact with the more enlightened spirits, every time he was psychographing, the light of the more evolved spirits made him aware of his own limitations. And so he always spoke of himself from this perspective. And a lot of times we have this tendency of idealize and of thinking of these people, whether it's Kardec, whether it's Chico Xavier, Divaldo Franco, and so many others as our references. And I would like to share this with you because a man looked for Chico many times. And he would travel to the city where he lived and would never find him. So at some point he says, I doubt very much of the mediumship of this man, because I've been traveling over there, I've been sacrificing my time, I've been spending money, and he is never there. So I think he's a fraud, and he's truly making this up. So he said that to someone who knew Chico, and the person went back to Chico and shared to Chico that this man had lost his faith because of him, because he was unable to find him. So Chico got pretty concerned. He reaches out to Emmanuel and asks what he should do. And Emmanuel's response was quite telling and quite significant, I think, for all of us to remember. He says, leave this case behind. If the faith of this man is being built upon you, it's better if you lose his faith, because we are all fallible creatures. Faith for him and for each one of us should be built upon Jesus Christ. Only trusting Jesus and following his examples is that we can connect with God. So a lot of times we build our faith on not solid basis, because none of us is solid yet. Jesus is the reference. Kardec is the GPS. And Chico is the example on how we can and what spirits invite us to do and to be. To bring all the knowledge, to bring all these lessons to every single day of our lives. And this is how we can, each one of us, contribute to the transformation and to the regeneration of our world. So thank you for being patient with me as I put my thoughts together. We have a few minutes, so if anyone would like to ask any questions,